Hi, my name's Amy. I am going to share a little bit of information with you today about birding, which is one of my favorite activities. And I'm in one of my favorite places along the Santa Clara River to go birding. I was just share just a little bit of information about how we bird and some of the things you can do to make that a little bit easier and more successful for you. So to start with, you will want to have some binoculars of some sort. They don't have to be super fancy, but something that can help you see the birds a lot closer so you know what you're looking at. In the way of binoculars, you could start with some binoculars that are really simple, that are great for little ones to carry, that are a little bit lighter. And then some that are maybe a little bit more advanced, that are still small, but can make it a little bit clearer to see. And then of course, the more advanced binoculars that you can see things much clearer and from much further away. In the way of the binoculars, some of the things that you want to look for if you're really wanting to purchase a new pair are, there's some numbers that you'll see on your binoculars. And usually it's a small number times a big number. The little ones, 4x30s, that means that it magnifies 4 times. The first number is the magnification, 4 times, and then 30 is the size of the opening, meaning how much space you can see. So if I look with these right here, it would magnify it 4 times, but I'm only gonna get a little bit of space. In the way of the next size, these magnify 8 times, and then mine actually magnify 10 times. And so you can see even better. And so you can see things like the feathers, you can see the eyes, you can see the colors, and those are all helpful things when you're trying to figure out what you're looking at. So that's what you want to start with. And then next would maybe be some sort of, if you're really wanting to get into this, some sort of identification guide, maybe some sort of book of some sort. There are lots of books to come by, some that are easier to use, harder to use. It's kind of your own preference. And otherwise, finding a good spot is going to be your next thing. So finding somewhere that is maybe a little bit quieter, somewhere that you can see some birds, somewhere that maybe you can hide yourself a little bit, and we'll see what we find. So here's a great spot to look for birds. Some of the things you want to look for and ideal spots to find birds are places that have some sort of shelter. So obviously bigger shrubs, trees, also places that have water. You can maybe hear the running water right below us. And in turn, if you have shelter with big trees and you have water, you most likely have food as well. Okay, so when we're out looking for birds, some of the things that, or any animals for that matter, some of the things you want to look for that make them stand out are movement or any sort of sound. Sometimes you hear rustling in the bush, something that maybe looks a little unusual, like maybe you're looking at a bush or a tree and there's something big and dark on one side. So looking for anything that catches your eye, most likely something abnormal in nature. So whether you're looking for birds or you're looking for other animals, you always want to look for movement or sound. And sometimes what that means is you have to stop and be quiet. Sometimes that means if you were to stand next to a shrub or a bush, you could blend into the environment. And that makes it where you don't stand out and scare all the animals away. So now that we're down by the river, we're getting into some wet sand and mud, which is an optimal spot to find tracks, which even though we're not seeing the birds themselves, at least we're seeing evidence of them. They were here, they were busy finding food. And what I can see here is I can see some tiny little tracks, not super tiny, but maybe some sort of small sandpiper that was feeding along the sand here. And the reason I know that even more so is I can actually see where it's been probing its beak into the sand, probably looking for little snails or little insects inside the sand and mud. So these are some of the evidence, some of the things we're looking for. Even though we're not seeing the birds, we know they were here. Big bird here.
What are you looking at, Amy?
I am looking for a little bird that we see flittering around along the river here. So some of the things I want to look for is color. Not that that's always an easy thing to go on. If it's foggy or overcast, you can't really see color. But you can see shape. And so what I could see was that it was a mostly all gray bird without much color. It stood really straight versus a lot of birds will lean forward. And that's something you want to look for, is just kind of the shape of a bird. That's actually sometimes the best thing to notice about a bird, is its shape, because color is always tricky and size is always tricky. I try not to go on size. A lot of people say, oh, it was a large bird, little bird, bigger than this. Sometimes that's hard to go on, because unless you have something to compare it to, it's really hard to determine. And then having an idea of the bird. I have a book here, Peterson's, that actually in the very beginning of it, it has a list of all the birds. It makes it a lot easier to find. So if you have an idea of what you're looking for, you can look it up. And this bird, I'm not totally sure, so I wanted to look it up before I say it for sure.
I see him.
So to narrow down the bird that we just saw, it was an all gray bird. Didn't really have any extra markings. So I thought either it's a vireo, which is a really special bird because it's an endangered species and often found here, or a bush tit. They're both kind of all gray, don't really have any distinctive markings. But what we noticed is that instead of him leaning forward, he actually stood very upright and had a little bit more of a brownish head. So not that it's that important to know exactly what the name of the bird is, but sometimes when you're looking for birds, just to know what kind of bird is more important than actually knowing the names.